Hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about Lecture 1, Meditation and the Default Mode Network. Let's jump in. So this slide tells us the Lecture 1 outcomes, and it's a kind of study guide for what we're going to be covering in this lecture and what you will learn and what will be on the quiz. So we're going to define mindfulness. We're going to have an experience of mindfulness. We're going to explain how mindfulness is a superpower, why mindfulness is kind of waking up. What are we waking up from? We're going to look at how meditation relates to mindfulness, different meditation exercises and what they do, what skills practicing mindfulness develops, if practicing mindfulness will turn you into a blob, the observer mode, our autopilot thinking system. This is where it gets really interesting. The default mode network, the executive or on-purpose network, and the salience network. These are like ways our brain is wired. Why thoughts can be so negative, why our brain has a negativity bias, how learning something new is like building a neural road, and if you're not your thoughts, who are you? So a lot for week 1. Let's go. Now this slide just shows you the week 1 practices that we have this week. 3 mindfulness practices each day, 3 times a day all week. The see, hear, feel, breathe practice. And then that's to bring us back home. And let's go ahead and take a breath. Breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth, as you have learned from the breath lesson. And you can click on these links to jump to these places. Here's meditation lesson 1. And then a second meditation experience. So we're going to look at how mindfulness is distinct from meditation. We could be called a kind of meditation. It's a meditation you can do all the time where you're wide awake and walking around. And then the meditation exercises are when you specifically sit down and quietly listen to these exercises and practice them. Okay, but first a quick tune-in question, and we'll have tune-in questions so we can touch base with ourselves and see where we're coming from. So a quick tune-in question, I would encourage you to write maybe in a log or in a journal these reflection questions. But I think I also asked you this one in one of the early assignments. But what drew you to this class, and what do you want to learn and experience? It's nice to touch into that so that we know, so that we're aware of what we want to. It's a way of being intentional. So let's define mindfulness. And before we define mindfulness, let's have a momentary mindful experience. Let's take a breath, pausing to breathe in through our nose and just relaxing our body, relaxing those micro tensions as we breathe out. And then put your attention in your left hand. Just become aware of your left hand. Put the spotlight of your awareness on your left hand. Maybe open and shut your hand. And there you are, right there in your left hand, not absorbed by thought. So if we drop down and put our attention, you can see that you put your attention into your left hand. That's a way of grounding yourself. You can move your attention now over to your right hand and notice it crossed the chest to do that. So now you're becoming more centered in your body, and you could drop your attention down into your left leg, into your left foot, back up and around to your right leg and your right foot, and then on up through the top of your body, your shoulders. Notice that it passed the heart to do that. You're integrating yourself up into your head and around and back down into your left hand. Good job. So this was a kind of mindfulness exercise that tunes us into our body. And a lot of mindfulness is getting out of being all jammed up with thoughts. One of the most interesting things that you'll find in this course is learning what's going on with this multiplicity of thoughts that run through your head. One well-accepted definition of mindfulness is that it's the state of being here now, fully experiencing these moments where you're in with kindness. And we add the with kindness or the gently to step away from judgmentalism, to shift out of judgmentalism. We'll talk a lot more about that as we go along. So rather than being carried away by thought, we come back. One of the phrases used is back to our senses, back to being grounded, back to being here now. The mind can zipper along. It can time travel. It can go into the future, go into the past, way faster than the body. And so it's nice to bring it on home. We feel frazzled if we spend too much time traveling in our mind away from our body. So let's take a breath and enjoy this short 3-minute animation by Dan Harris, who has both an app and a book called 10% Happier. He's a newscaster that we'll learn more about, who became interested in meditation. And we'll refer to this often. So we'll take a look at this video clip.
You may have heard this word mindfulness. It's become something of a buzz phrase of late. I'm going to give you one simple, serviceable definition, which is this. Mindfulness is the ability to know what's happening in your head at any given moment without getting carried away by it. Imagine how useful this could be. Just as an example, driving down the road and somebody cuts you off in traffic. How do you normally react? I think most of us, we normally react by having a thought, which is, I'm pissed. And then what happens next? You immediately, habitually, reflexively inhabit that thought. You actually become pissed. There's no buffer between the stimulus and your reaction. With just a little bit of mindfulness, in that same situation, you might notice my chest is buzzing, my ears are turning red, I'm having a starburst of self-righteous thoughts, I'm getting angry. But you don't necessarily have to act on it and chase that person down the road, screaming at them with your kids in the back of the car thinking you've gone nuts. Now, you might be thinking, don't I need to get angry sometimes? Aren't I justified? I would say yes, but probably not as much as you think. The proposition here is not that you should be rendered by mindfulness into some lifeless, non-judgmental blob. The proposition is that you should learn how to respond wisely to things that happen to you, rather than just reacting blindly. And that, my friends, is a superpower. How do you get it? The way to get it is through meditation. I believe that meditation and mindfulness are the next big public health revolution. In the 1940s, if you told somebody you were going running, they would have said, who's chasing you? But then what happened next? The scientists swooped in, they showed that physical exercise is really good for you, and now all of us do it, and if we don't, we feel guilty about it. And that's where I think we're headed with mindfulness and meditation. It's going to join the pantheon of no-brainers like brushing your teeth, eating well, and taking the meds your doctor prescribed for you. Let me just close by saying, mindfulness is not going to solve all of your problems. It's not going to render your life a nonstop parade of unicorns and rainbows. Nonetheless, this is a superpower, and one that is accessible by you immediately.
Okay, so that gives us a great feel, an intro to mindfulness. As Dan Harris says, these are in quotes, mindfulness is the ability to know what's going on in our head at any given moment without getting carried away by it. Oops. Because we often can get carried away by it. So he writes here about you're driving down the road and somebody cuts you off in traffic. How do we normally react, right? We feel a almost automatic reaction of anger, and then the negative thoughts start happening. And then, and you can think of the moments that you experience this, there's no buffer between the stimulus and our reaction. Our reaction is automatic, and there's not much choice. So mindfulness gives us the ability to create that space for choice. With a little bit of mindfulness in that same situation, we start to notice our sensations, what it feels like that we label getting angry. And being able to label those sensations enables us to create a space so that we can begin to decide how we want to react to that feeling instead of react on autopilot, rather than getting carried away and automatically react. So mindfulness, in addition to helping us be more fully right here, right now, so that we experience life, gives us this capacity, as Dan Harris describes it, the superpower to create a space between the reactions happening inside of us and how we act them out. So mindfulness has definitely changed my life in many ways. That space changes your life, right? But here's a small and really recent example. I walked into Subway a few nights ago, and right away I got annoyed because my pre-order wasn't ready. My mind started immediately thinking angry thoughts that weren't really in tune with my heart, right? My heart wasn't as angry as my mind was. So you know the drill, because these kinds of thoughts are reflexes and automatic. They're stimulated the part of the brain that we'll talk about in a moment, the default mode network, that is automatically reacting because our needs aren't immediately being met, right? So we don't really choose to get mad in those instances. We just find ourselves mad. It's like an automatic response. It's like, oh, I'm mad. So mindfulness is the difference between responding thoughtfully from your whole self compared to being taken over by an automatic reaction. And regular meditation and mindfulness practice strengthen our ability to do that, which is really the more whole us, right? It's not a sub piece of us, as we'll learn our reactions are. This is why it is said that practicing meditation, you may have heard this phrase, can lead to waking up. This is even the title of another famous meditation teacher's app, Sam Harris, who I also really like. We're basically waking up to a greater, wider awareness of ourselves and our life. Let's take a breath and feel our left hands and allow ourselves to relax those micro tensions as we breathe out and feel that warm feeling of being centered. So mindfulness enhances self-awareness, impulse control, and our ability to respond thoughtfully rather reactively. It also enables us to be fully present rather than carried away by thought, which is what happens when we're not fully present. Is usually it's because we're carried away by a thought or an emotion, which can be thought of as a kind of spell that our own being casts on us. So while mindfulness doesn't solve all our problems, it really is a superpower. You can see how having much greater capacity to not push the send button in the many different ways that we do that, by popping off and saying something that then becomes an argument, by a trigger or cascade of thoughts that run through our head that drive us nuts. So being able to create space between us and that, you can see the space here between us and the chaos, enables us to have sort of a safe zone. We can step into it anytime we want to. This space, ironically, like in relationships, in your good relationships, you have to have some in space. You can't be completely enmeshed with the person all the time, or there's no real distinction between me and you. That's like, that's how an infant or a newborn doesn't really have much of a distinction between itself and its mother. So meditation includes different kinds of exercises, and mindfulness is a kind of meditation. It is one of the ones that can be done all the time. But when you think about sit-down meditations, they're doing things like breath exercises. They're doing a bunch of things. And a lot of times we think they're only doing one thing, but they're actually doing a lot of things. And there's definitely a scales of meditation. Concentration meditation is focused exercises like gazing at a candle or staying tuned into your breath. So that's a concentration meditation that trains our ability to focus our attention. Breath exercises calm our body and soothe our nervous system, so we actually can calm our mind as well because they work in tandem with each other. Imaginative exercises and visualizations open up our minds so we're not just reiterating the past into the future, and prepare our minds for new possibilities and new ways of being. And we can also use imaginative exercises and visualizations to pave new neural pathways. Reciting meaningful words like mantras intentionally direct our minds to ways of being that are important to us. Moving meditations like Tai Chi and yoga connect our mind and body. Expansive exercises like Be the Sky that give us the feeling of space. These are the kinds of exercises that really help to relax stress, is when we experience wide zones of spaciousness. Now, all of these different kinds of meditation exercises. So when you imagine a monk in a monastery meditating, they're doing lots, and each of these has many different kinds of exercises, right? So it's not like, or many different ways it can be done. So it's not like they're only doing one thing. I mean, occasionally that happens, but it's rare. Usually it's a combination, an eclectic mix of exercises, all of which train the ability to tune into and direct the light of awareness and create some space between ourselves and the wildness of the world. So meditation is usually practiced while sitting or lying in a calm place, usually, but not always with closed eyes. So definitely not while driving. And it strengthens our ability to be mindful. It's like a mindfulness workout. And mindfulness can be practiced all the time, right? When you're standing in the shower, dropping in. And it's nice to use an anchor like your left hand, which brings your awareness back into your body, and then you can tune into something like the water falling on your back, falling water is fascinating just to watch visually, so that we can get immersed into the experiences of our lives. So we have a mindful exercise number 1, which you can click on the link here in this exercise, which will walk you through that exercise. And this is a beautiful exercise that I love to do called See, Hear, Feel, Breathe, Relax, Relax, Relax. It's another exercise that tunes us back into our body. Let's take a breath, where we start by looking at what we can see. We just let our eyes light on something, and we're just bringing ourselves back to our senses, right? Returning from the whirlwind mind back to the body. From all that astral traveling our mind does. The first thing that astral travels is your mind. So see, what do you see? Then what do you hear turning into sounds? I hear my dog snoring while she breathes. And then feel. You can feel things like the pressure of your body in the chair, or you can feel things like the excitement or energy that you have in the body. I feel some pressure on my foot because I'm sitting on my foot. And then we take a breath. We always want to be able to remember to breathe, to practice breathing more deeply, and to allow that out breath to be a little bit longer. And as you do the out breath, say to yourself, relax, relax, relax. Teach your body to relax. You're your body's teacher. It's your teacher too, but you can also really help it to relax. And then maybe feel some loving kindness in your heart, appreciation for something. So I want to encourage you to do that mindfulness exercise this week 3 times a day for the week. And see how that goes. And you could just reflect on it now and then in your log. These are some of the skills that you can gain or build or strengthen that mindfulness and meditation practices help us strengthen. And of course, this is the very stuff of life, right? Regulating emotions, having a bigger picture perspective. We're able to think more creatively and problem solve better. And there's very clear neurological reasons why that is so that we'll look at. We can better concentrate, focus, and direct attention because we're actually training concentration, which enables us to be more patient and less judgmental of self and others. The whole developing increased comfort with hanging out in your interior space is very helpful, rather than when you try to sit still or relax or go to sleep at night feeling anxious and agitated. Cultivating. Now, you can't always control the emotions. It's rather you gain the ability to tolerate the emotions better, right? And help to soothe them and work with them rather than just be taken over by them. So that's huge. Right? You're in relationship with your emotions and in relationship with your thoughts. We don't have complete control, but it's like you have teams that you can work with and manage, teams of emotions and teams of thoughts that you can, like having a sports team that you're working with. So you're the coach of the team. So you can have a big influence. They've got energies, themselves. Anger has an energy. Fear has an energy, but we can learn to work with them better more skillfully. It helps us recover better after setbacks and challenges, to be resilient, to be able to bounce back. Life's filled with setbacks and challenges, so that's a good skill to develop. It strengthens our self-discipline, it improves immune function, and supports our being fully engaged with our life. Meditation strengthens our ability to experience the observer mode. So we become de-enmeshed. Notice that if we're in the soup, we can't see the soup, right? We can't really even taste the soup. We're just completely taken over by the soup. So the soup of thought, the soup of motion, right? So we've got to have some space here. We needed to be able to have some space between, so that we're not completely consumed by what we're experiencing. And I know you know the feeling of being consumed. And I don't think we knew. It's very exciting, new knowledge for us. Even in the East, meditation was moderately rare until more modern times. And so where not that many people were exposed to it. So you know, the practices. So this is a new capacity for the masses. And it's really a huge step in our experience of being human, is to be able to build this spaciousness. Now, we can obviously step in and immerse anytime we want, but the spaciousness, this is the point of choice, is in that space. So what are all those thoughts in your head? And this is where we get to a really interesting term called the default mode network, which is an automatic background thinking program of your mind. So these are the autopilot thoughts that you happen in the back of your mind when you're just walking around, or they're the thoughts that happen to you. You think on purpose. We all think on purpose. We think strategically. We learn things. We decide to focus on our intention. And we have some capacity to direct things that way. But that part of our mind actually gets tired. And when it does, the default mode network kicks in. The default mode network is an automatic process. It happens in the back of our mind automatically. What this network of thoughts, and it's a network just like a electrical network of wires that go from your computer to your speaker, right? It's a network, a particular network. And there's not the only network of our mind. Like, for example, on purpose thinking is another network. But this autopilot default mode network, it largely comes from conditioned things that we experienced in our past, or what we experience in our environment and see, right? So this part of our brain can work on autopilot just like your stomach can. It uses information from the past to project what might happen in the future. I realize that metaphor is probably just totally confusing now. Our digestive system works automatically. The default mode network of our thinking mind works automatically. We get confused because we can think on purpose, but we know we can begin to realize that we could divide it into two categories of when we do and don't think on purpose. So we can think about the autopilot system of thought and the intentional system of thought, where we're deciding to think. This is the conscious reasoning, mindful self. It takes intentional effort to turn on and run. It drains our mental energy, and it's used mainly when we learn new information and we're actually thinking or reflecting or being thoughtful or contemplative or even mindful. It can be trained to turn on when it detects the autopilot system maybe making an error. So the autopilot, just like you can drive on autopilot, you can think on autopilot. And those autopilot thoughts that happen in your thinking mind, usually they come from past learning. And since it's an autopilot system, it's simple. You know, it runs on like a program of what it's picked up from the past. It can't be creative and think of brand new ideas necessarily. So, and it can also make mistakes. And this is an average 80% of the time. So if you had a really rough childhood, for example, and there was a lot of negativity in it, then you could assume that your autopilot thought system is going to be negative and probably inaccurate, therefore. And so not necessarily making accurate statements anyway about you. That's where the inner critic comes from. So our mind and body put as much as they can on autopilot. When you learned how to drive, at first it was really hard and you really had to focus. You used your intentional system a lot. But when you learned how to do it really well, after you got used to it, it got put on the default mode network so you could drive on autopilot, right? So just like you can gain muscle memory and different kinds of memory about how to do things, thought too can articulate itself from a memory system. Here are 3 of the circuits of your mind, and where it's lit up is you can see this is the circuit or how it's wired, bang, bang, bang. And here in the emotional system, in the middle of the brain, look how lit up that was. That's where our emotions are. And, our core emotions like anxiety and uncertainty and, anger and fear and sadness. So the default mode networks activates when not performing a test. These are the thoughts that happen automatically in your brain when you're not deciding to think. The central executive network is what we were talking about with focus, concentration thoughts. This is when you're deciding to think or focusing your concentration. And the salience network is when you're stepped back and you're in reflective. You're in a sort of more open, reflective, spacious. You feel a sense of spaciousness. Big picture view, okay? This is the most fluid and it can decide where to go. So we take in the most information in the salience network. It has the most accurate information. Default mode network is largely from societal conditioning in the past and stories that we've decided that we buy into. Like if we if we have a storyline that we tell ourselves, and we all have storylines. So the storylines can be limited, but they can become part of the default mode network. So, for example, thinking that I'm never going to meet anybody great, or I'm always going to have to work too hard, or just belief systems that we come up with that are difficult for us come from the default mode, or they get cemented by the default mode network. And if one of cognitive behavioral therapy is about using the executive network to untangle the default mode network. Meditation and mindfulness are about creating space between the default mode network and your salience and central executive network, so you can be aware of when you're in it and step out of it, step out of the stream of thoughts that are maddening. So one of them tries to rewire them. One of them tries to be able to create space between you and that so you don't get taken over by it so much. And both of them are valuable. Both of them are really useful, both these strategies. So neural networks, they're like patterns I already mentioned to you these are actually neural connections that, let me show you the neural connection slide, which I think is a few slides down. Neural connections that, it is a few slides down here. These neural connections, these are neurons forming. Let's say you're learning something like a new piano phrase. And so you start to learn it. At first it's choppy, and then you practice and you get better at it, and then you practice and you get better at it, and then you can do it automatically. Okay, and so it gets thrown into the default mode network of your physical abilities. You can see how handy the default mode network is because we can't be on. It just takes too much bandwidth for the thinking brain to work, the executive center to work. So the default mode network is a necessary part, but we want to be able to retinker it, rewire it if it's not useful. Like when you get over PTSD, you've got a reaction that's automatic, that's really well grouped in, a trauma reaction, and it has to be unwired, right? They call it systematic desensitization, where the person becomes desensitized, but it's really neural pruning. In terms of a neurological level, the neurons are actually being cut back, right? We're disintegrating them. So when we break an old habit, we're doing this. When we start a new habit, we're moving in this direction. And they're like roads in the sense that when you first start to build a road, it's hard. It takes more work and energy. And then after a while, they become like super highways, right? And this is true. This methodology, a habit is a neuron, whether it's being, playing guitar or being grumpy. So we strengthen our habits or we loosen them. And this is the biological process that's going on. Okay, and so when neural highways get built, that means things we practice really well. Neural circuits are regular highways that the brain has built. And that's what these are kind of reflecting in light form. All right. So the default mode network neural circuits are largely wired by past experience, but the future is not a duplication of the past. And so we have the executive network that can analyze and think and reflect on things and imagine and all that. And so we need both, right? But we want our default mode network, we want to fix the errors in our default mode network. And one of the errors in default mode network, for example, would be having a negative inner voice, right? So our default mode network, that thought pattern stream that runs through our head, is vulnerable to being anxious because of our brain's negativity bias. And this is our mind's default position to groove in negative experience much faster than positive experience because it thinks that they're more important to remember for survival. And that may have been true back in the hunter-gatherer days, but for us now with much longer lifespans, what going into over accumulating negative experiences, grooving them in way more intensely than positive ones, has a long-term detrimental effect on us because it means that what comes to mind most readily, both in terms of our thinking and in terms of our emotions, will be negative experiences, So when you go to bed at night, that's what you remember, right? Because of the negativity bias, our brain automatically overwires negative experiences. I really want to repeat that. Our brain overwires negative experiences. Let me do that one more time. Our brain, let's take a breath, is designed by evolution to overwire negative experiences, to overgroove them. So we'll have to work to offset. We're also sort of designed by nature to, as we get older, we lose muscle tone and we start to curl forward, right? So we need to open our shoulders. Leaning over all the time for your cell phone will do that all the time. Also, so opening your shoulders, we got to counteract it by consciously choosing to open our shoulders. And we can counteract the negativity bias by absorbing the positive moments of our lives, being aware of this bias, which is, and we'll talk about it a good deal over the semester, which is not helpful to our long-term well-being, to accumulate negativity over time, right? And it also leads to an accurate view of reality, obviously. So you can see the two little parts of the brain here, or the heart is going, look, all these wonderful things, sun shining, birds chirping, but the brain's like, no, I gotta see. Okay, knowing this, we can counteract it. Okay, we can consciously choose to shift and train ourselves to change our perception. What another superpower that is. It's because of the negativity bias that your default mode network goes on this rumination at night before you go to sleep. Ce n'est pas ta faute. It's not your fault. But it is our job to change it so that we can feel better in our lives, right? This is why it's the autopilot perception that they mean by Maya. Well, we can say Maya, or the idea that life is, what we're experiencing is an illusion. That's a really interesting philosophical idea. And one way that it manifests is that the default mode network can be wrong. And it's worried all the time. It tends to be fear-based and certain. So your default mode network thoughts are definitely not you. I'll repeat that one too. Your default mode network thoughts are definitely not you. Nope. They're autopilot thing, just like your stomach digestion process is not you. It's part of you, but it's not you. You wouldn't say, I am my stomach digestion processes. No, you say, I have a stomach. I have a default mode network. This is an interesting drawing, and it shows that you're back here in the back. Take a step back from the default mode network. You can observe the default mode network. You can observe you can shift your awareness around. You are the one who is aware. You are the one who is aware of your thoughts. We'll talk about this too a lot more. We'll sort of untangle that as we go along. You could say that you're behind your thinking mind, directing your awareness. Direct it to imagination. You direct it to solving a problem. You direct it to resting. You direct it to observing the emotions in your body. You're the one who can direct awareness. So meditation and mindfulness help us strengthen the salience mind, the part of us that can step back, observe it all, and choose which network to use and switch in and out between them. because sometimes you do want to go on the default mode network, but you want a good one. Okay, it shifts us out of the default. Mindfulness helps us shift out of the default mode network, sort of taking over our lives, because we become overly identified with these thoughts. We think they actually are us when they're really just a program that has been written by past experiences and current experiences, that the sort of the part of you that wants you to survive and do well. That's why that part of my brain would get annoyed at Subway, because it sees, another way that it's wrong is it sees me as the center of the universe, right? Our default mode networks are rather narcissistic and obsessive. So they need help. They can't do it by themselves, and they certainly don't need us thinking that that's who we are, is them, because they don't come from the wider realm of intentional thought that you're capable of and that you actually are. And not just intentional thought, but the salience network of, sort of instincts, intuition, creativity, and so on. So one of the nice things about practicing mindfulness is just not being overly enmeshed with the default mode network, not being so tangled up with it, and returning to the feeling of being all here. Let's take a breath. I love looking at these little kids playing in the water. We're able to take in more. Our perception expands. Let's relax. Relax your shoulders. You notice details that were missing before. You experience more space between things that trigger reactivity, and we feel the fullness of life more. Now, you've experienced this many times in your life. You experience it times numerous in the day. And what we'll want to do is expand on the experiences like this that you have, using exercises and tools like the see, hear, feel, breathe exercise. Also the left hand. These are tools that can bring us back to here now and break the chain of the habit of getting carried away by the default mode network. So meditation helps us break the hypnotic hook of the default mode network, which so many people are walking around basically, hypnotized by, in a sense, or taken over by. And Dan Harris called a fog of projection and rumination. Let's take a look at this short animation by Dan Harris about what meditation is. And it's surprising because many people think that meditation is to sit and then your mind should be still. But that's not how it works. You sit and you find out, oh my gosh, I've got an inner 3-year-old in there that's going nuts, or monkey is what they call it in the East, the monkey mind. And so we want to, hug the monkey, love the monkey, and help it settle down. Help our inner 3-year-old. So you, the salience executive, teaching, helping, guiding, coaching, soothing both your body and the networks of your mind, so they can feel better, so they can relax. Let's take a breath.
Despite what you may have heard, meditation does not involve joining a group, paying any fees, wearing any special outfits, sitting in a funny position, or believing in anything in particular. It is simple, secular, scientifically validated exercise for your brain. You don't have to do it yet, but just so you know, here are the 3 steps. 1, sit with your back straight and your eyes closed. 2, notice the feeling of your breath coming in and going out. Pick a spot where it's most prominent. Usually that's your nose or your chest or your belly, and just focus your full attention on the feeling of your breath coming in and going out. Now, as soon as you try to do this, your mind's going to go nuts. You're going to start thinking about, what am I going to have for lunch? Why did I say that dumb thing to my boss? Your brain's going to go nuts, and that's fine. The whole game is to notice when you've gotten lost and to start over, and then to start over again, and again, and again. Every time you do that, it's like a bicep curl for your brain, and it shows up on the brain scan. Scientists have found this in the lab. It's also, by the way, a radical act. You're breaking a lifetime's habit of walking around in a fog of projection and rumination, and you're actually focusing on what's happening right now. Meditation is unlike anything you do in the rest of your life. Failure is actually success. As I said, the whole game is just trying, failing, starting again, failing, starting again. Here's my advice. You should be meditating every day, 5 to 10 minutes a day. That's it. This doesn't require some giant investment. I don't care how busy you are. You have 5 to 10 minutes to give this a shot. I guarantee you it will make a big difference.
Okay, great little happy video animation. So, as he says, what we do is, well, there's a guided meditation that you can do in the course, and meditation lesson 1 explains how it's the return of our attention back to our point of focus, and this is focused meditation style. Return of our attention back, that is the bicep curl, that is the training that helps us gain control back of our attention back from the 3-year-old. So we're not used to stepping back from the default mode network. So we got to give it some time and some patience, right? So that's why we start with short ones and longer periods of being guided, and over time we expand the silence and it gets easier, and we want to make it as easy as possible, as positive an experience for you as possible, so that you want naturally to return to it. And one of the things we wanted to do with this intro lecture was create awareness of why it can be so valuable to meditate. Because if you convince your rational mind, which is your real thinking mind, that it's valuable, then it'll be easier to do it, right? You'll be more drawn to practice it. So we already talked about this slide, and we'll be returning to it a lot, about how learning something new is like building a path. It's actually a neural path that you're grooving. So the more you practice and writing things down, saying them out loud, like saying default mode network out loud, strengthens the neural path. Writing things down strengthens the neural path, writing those words down. So when you study, getting more active with it will more quickly groove the path than passively studying. So say words that you're trying to learn out loud. Say them a bunch of times out loud while you're walking from here to the kitchen, and say default mode network, default mode network, default mode network. And it'll groove a lot faster than just reading it once. So here's the first meditation lesson. It includes a breath exercise, 10-minute concentration meditation, and closing metta loving kindness phrases. These metta loving kindness phrases is a way of meditation. This is like putting a dance routine together, right? 3 parts of a dance routine, which is very common in meditation. So the metta loving kindness phrases have been well researched, and they really are considered one of the kinds of meditations that's highly effective at calming stress and calming anxiety, as is our breath exercises that relax our body. So we're intentionally helping our body relax, and we can do this. One of the Navy SEALs breathe long and slow all the time. That's the training. And that gives you much more control over your system. So the key, there's many different kinds of breath exercises, but for inducing the relaxation response, what we want to do is breathe down into our belly, right? And the easy way to do that is to breathe out, push your belly button to your back, and then your in-breath will be naturally deeper. And you breathe in through your nose and then out through your mouth usually. And you can help slow down your breath by breathing out through your mouth pursed, like you're breathing out through a straw. And have a longer out breath than in breath, just by 1 or 2 seconds. Because the in breath is actually the energizing system, and the out breath actually stimulates our relaxation system. So we want that out breath a little longer. And then consciously you can pick an area of your body to relax, like your shoulders, your jaw, your hands. Tune into that left hand. That's another mindfulness exercise. So let's try breathing out and then breathing in. 2, and we usually count to 4. 3, 4. Open the shoulders, breathe in a little bit more. That double breath also stimulates the relaxation response. And then breathe out. 2, 3, 4, 5, and we relax. Good. And you can just let your breath continue, and definitely do the breath meditation that's on the site. And then here's our 10-minute meditation exercise. So enjoy, everyone. These are the 4 phrases, metta loving kindness phrases, that we say at the end of the meditation. And we begin by extending them to ourselves and to a loved one, and then we'll extend them to maybe neighbors and people we come across, like at the grocery store, office mates, people you work with. They're very powerful at cultivating gentleness and ease. And then we extend them to people maybe that we're having some conflict with, which all adds to the gentleness and ease, right? And you choose how you extend the metta loving kindness phrases, and I'll guide you through it. So that's our Lecture 1. I'm so glad you joined me for it. I very much appreciate that you are here and that we are in this study together, because this is a lifetime process. And I just want to close with this slide. I think it's the second or third slide that shows our practice exercises for the week, but they're also on your meditation and mindfulness log assignment page. Thank you, everyone. Let's take a breath and relax together. And I wish you a most wonderful day.